What's up, everybody? I'm Stan.
I'm Mac.
And this is Ben, and we're going to build this computer. We are the hot mess of tech shows because we're doing this at work. So this is going to be a little rogue, guys, a little steady handy cam action. What we have is our friend Ben has decided to go from his laptop to a desktop PC, and Mac and myself made some recommendations, and he mostly stuck with them, but the whole idea is he has never put together a computer and barely knows exactly what goes on inside of it, and today is going to be him figuring it out.
That's a little too much credit. I have no idea what I'm doing.
Since this is kind of like a little bit improvised, what do we have here, Ben? What did you end up buying?
I honestly don't know. It is a Roswell colon case and a huge pile of all the parts you told me to buy.
All right, so it is a Roswell case, and he did actually a pretty decent job. It's got 3 fans, 320 millimeter fans installed in the front, and then another one in the back. Yeah. Tempered glass side panel, multiple filters. As you can see, it's actually got these magnetic filters on the top, another one at the bottom for the power supply. Front USB 3.0s. Looks like no USB Type-C, but you can't get everything with everything. The other parts is where we get interesting. So we have what looks to be an Inland Professional 240 gig SSD, which was what, like 45, 50 bucks?
Actually, I think it was only 30.
So like $30 for a 240 gig SSD. We're going to put the operating system on that. We have, of course, the Ryzen 5. So this is the 2600. Probably one of the best values in processors right now. Gives you 6 cores, 12 threads, boost up to 3.9 gigahertz on factory clocks. And because we're sticking with the factory cooler on this, that is why we're going to be relying on that boost to get the performance. Of course, he's keeping it a little RGB in this thing. So we've got Corsair Vengeance RGB. This is a 3000 megahertz RAM. And the reason that it's 3000 megahertz is why? Well, most Ryzen optimizations doesn't happen beyond 3200 megahertz, and we could probably overclock that a little bit without any real issue. So that's a very good thing. What else do we have here, Mac?
So right here we have a 1 terabyte spinning turtle drive, just so he can keep all of his movies and games and things. Anything he wants that to be readily accessible, he'll probably throw on the SSD as well. We also have a 600 watt EVGA bronze power supply, which is awesome. Love these things. And then an AX370 gaming gigabyte motherboard, which makes me feel outdated and old with all of my stuff.
Considering I'm the old one here, I understand.
Awesome.
So the nice thing about the gaming is that it's not necessarily, it's got built-in overclocking, it's got ultra-durable components, but also it is Ryzen 2000 ready, so we don't have to worry about BIOS updates and driver updates immediately from the get-go. We can drop the processor in and be good to go. And since Ben's going to be putting this together, that's probably a good thing. His graphics card, which he purchased, would you get a 1070?
Yeah, Asus factory overclocked 1070.
So probably an Asus ROG Strix OC GTX 1070, which is nice. So just to get everything on, we're going to go with one of our cards that we have from the stash, the GTX 660 Ti Power Edition, which is
EOC, man.
Which is a really solid graphics card. However, this is really mostly just get operating system on there, get the everything all set up, so that way when his card comes in, we can put it together and everything will actually be how it's going to run for a while. But now you're seeing boxes. Next, you're going to see it unboxed. So to start the process, what we're going to do is we're just going to tear down the case and get a really clean canvas so that way we can unbox the motherboard, get everything all squared away, and then start plugging in components and making sure that everything's good. So this case does have dual tempered glass side panels, so there's plenty of routing options as well as a controller board for the front. You can see that there's a variety of different channels, so that way we can route the cables and make everything look nice on the back side. There's 3 SSD slots, so you can actually mount the drives on the back of it. We've got a bottom-mounted power supply, 3 drive bays available down at the bottom. Only really 2 with these removable carriers, which are going to allow you to just kind of pull your drives in and out. And then you can see these channels that make their way into the motherboard for things like the power cable, which are going to appear on the front side. Looks like it's already set up for an ATX motherboard, so we should be good. The nice thing that this has got is these gaskets, so that way you can kind of arrange your cables coming out from the bottom part of the power supply up to the front. But as is common with cases these days, no 5 1/4 drive bays, no opticals necessary.
I don't know what I'm supposed to touch and not touch.
Well, that's half the fun. It comes in an electrostatic bag, so that way you can get rid of static discharge and it doesn't kind of like kill itself. But in reality, they're a pretty durable bit of electronics.
Yeah.
So it's not really a huge concern. So let's take a look at this X370 Gaming. All right. So here we've got the X370 Gaming. Of course, you've got your socket AM4 processor with the factory kind of like ARM-style cooler setup. The VRMs have a small heatsink on them, so you've got your VRM and your chokes currently here. Looks like it's pretty much a 4+3 phase, which is perfectly fine. 8-pin PC or CPU power connector. We've got an SLI capable board because it is an X370 chipset, and you've actually got an M.2 slot, so if you wanted to improve that with a little bit faster storage, you would be able to, and it'd run off the SATA or the PCI channel. On the back, if we were running an APU, like a Ryzen 2200 or a 2400G, we do have an HDMI connector, but it looks like we've got 6 USB 2.0s and then a couple USB 3.0s in there as well as full onboard audio. Pretty knockout board. The only thing that we don't necessarily have is an LCD display for any kind of error codes. So that's something that we're going to have to play by ear, which unfortunately we can't do because we don't have a speaker unless one came with a case. This is where we're going to be starting off. Next, time to go for the processor. So this is your premium Ryzen 2600 unboxing experience. What we have here, of course, we have the AMD factory style Wraith cooler. So this is going to actually have factory thermal paste on it. It's going to be more than enough to cool a CPU if it's not doing any serious overclocking, things like that. But then you've got the actual brain, the heart of everything, which is the Ryzen 2600. And then you've got a little case badge if you wanted to stick that on there. But the real thing that we want to do is we want to open up the socket, make sure that everything's operating, and then drop that bad boy in there, and then secure the cooler. As we can see, it looks like this cooler style actually uses 4 screws, so we're going to have to remove those brackets and make sure that we can mount it properly before we go anywhere. And the one thing you've got to be aware of when you're doing this, there's thermal paste on the bottom, and if you set this on a hard surface the way it's currently configured, it's going to stick to that surface, and then it's going to ruin your thermal paste, and you're going to have to scrape it off and redo it anyway.
Sometimes you just sound like a infomercial.
Mm-hmm. He always sounds like I have no idea what I'm talking about, so. Sweet.
All right, so open the clasp on the socket.
Is that a sticker?
Yes, for your case.
Open
In case
the
you
clasp
wanted.
on the socket.
Yes, that little arm that's on the black thing.
This
Yep,
it.
so push it out,
Yes.
and then up.
So, yes.
Okay, so what that does is there's actually like a second plate
Slider.
underneath,
Yeah.
so it pinches the pins. So when you're going to pull open the CPU, there's actually going to be pins on the bottom that are exposed. See?
Sort of. Oh yeah, those little things?
Those
Oh,
are made of
goddamn.
gold. They bend easy. Don't ask me to do it. I'm covered in pizza.
I would have done it the other way around, but that's fine.
Pulled it out the other way?
Oh my god!
You're so
Don't do
funny.
that. Don't you do that.
Oh, come on.
Well, where does it go? Does it matter?
Yes,
Yes.
it does.
See the
So
arrow?
you want to match it up with the orange arrow that's on the top of the green PCB.
No,
It
dropped.
should just drop it.
Yep. It did.
And it's aligned correctly.
Yep.
Cool.
Orange arrow.
Drop the arm down.
And tuck it underneath. Yeah. You're good to go.
That's cool.
That's locked in.
So as I'm sure you're familiar, Ben, you're going to want to tighten that down in kind of like a star style pattern, similar to like tightening a wheel or something along those lines. So don't get too terribly tight. You want to make sure that everything seats properly and then go even with the pressure.
Ben's a car guy, so we're
Yeah.
trying to make this understandable.
Yeah, but he's also a car guy, so I'm thinking, hey, so what if I cross-thread it this time? I'm not going to have to take it apart next time.
Put this cooler down with 3 Ugga-Duggas.
Where is the helicoils?
Yeah.
How many zip ties does it take to hold down a CPU cooler? That's a video.
These do
That
not
is a
seem to
video.
be. to be going in. Thought they were. That one is.
Cool. Cool. Cool.
You did a thing, Ben.
That one's good to go now. And here's the thing, Ben. You have to be very fragile with this, but now you can just grab it and it doesn't really matter because
Yeah,
it's
super
attached to that back plate.
Yeah, which pretty
So-
much holds everything pretty solid.
Exactly. So, they are made to be taken care of, but it's
Yeah.
not necessarily anything
It's
too
not
crazy.
like the motherboard itself weighs that much.
Yeah, CPU fan header here.
Yeah.
So it's obviously a directional style plug.
Yep.
So it hits that guide, and then that is going to control fan
then-
RPMs at
And then
Stan
all
bends
temperature.
the pins.
Yep.
So-
That's good.
this. If we'd mounted it the other way, or we
Would've
try to
been
like,
stretched,
rotate it or something like that, so that way we could make it look a little sexier. But
That's okay.
Figure it out.
We'll make it work.
yeah, as soon as you put your memory in, we'll be able to tuck it in there,
Tuck
and
it
it'll
in.
look a lot better.
Cool. Next, step 2. So Ben, how did you afford this computer, and
Oh,
what
let's-
predicament has this put you in?
Let's not talk about my future wife on video. She's lovely, and I hope never sees this.
It's fine.
The combined cost of all these parts was exactly $44.
Yes.
Yeah.
Exactly how much your quilt costs.
Yeah.
So I'm being the camera guy, and I'm falling behind. So basically, we have the power supply all set up. We're going to start plugging that into the motherboard as we speak, as soon as Ben gets it
I'm
situated.
trying not to lose everything.
It's probably a good plan.
So the one thing you're going to want to note, you see how this
Yeah.
this actually tucks where those arrows are?
So is that part of 24?
Older power supplies and older motherboards only needed 20 pins,
Yep.
but modern ones are 24, so they put it in as that kind of like accessory. Don't worry too much about the slack and stuff like that. But yeah, so you want to, it only goes in one way. Is that the way?
It looked like the way, but apparently not.
Nope. There you go.
Still doesn't feel like the way.
Well, yeah, because this one's going to go in first, because if you take a look at the bracket, you see how it's got that little ridge underneath it?
Yep.
So that way they pop together.
Yep.
And then this would go,
See, it looked like it went this way. Because
it
that
goes
clips.
this way.
Yeah, Mac.
Oh.
There we go.
I'm looking at this through a camera.
So you see how that flexed?
Yeah.
Doesn't matter.
Well, let's be easy.
So now
You had a water cooling, you had your air cooling set up, and you set it in the car, and there's all kinds of different reasons. Don't flick the switch, okay?
I don't know if it's on or off, so.
Okay, so this is binary. You have ones and zeros.
Yeah.
One is power.
0 is not power.
Yeah.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah,
You're right.
because one is on and zero is off.
I'm literally just trying to think of how it looks on my leaf blower.
Perfect. So the next thing that you're going to need is you're going to need actual CPU power. So this cable fits into these 8 pins over here, and that feeds two 12-volt signals into the actual CPU itself.
So this looks like these ones don't actually connect, they're two separate.
They do.
They do. They have little plastic, little
Really?
love handles.
There we go.
So did you put?
What?
Are they connected?
Yep.
All right. Cool.
Go.
So now you can actually flick the switch on the power supply.
You sure?
Yep. And then because this isn't hooked up to the case,
Yep.
what we need is, where is the power switch? Da-da-da-da. So there's actually, since we don't have the owner's manual or anything like that out here, what we're doing is we're looking at the PCB to see where they actually screen printed on where the power switch, the power LED, that kind of stuff is. So it looks like that is the power switch.
Whoa.
So this basically means that power is going through the board. However, if we had some sort of audio component, it would tell us that there is no RAM inside the socket. So it would be like beep, 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 or something along those lines.
47 beeps later.
Yeah, but this is going to tell you that essentially everything is functioning right with the motherboard at this point in time. So the next thing that we want to do is actually get everything into the case, because this is about as close as we can get to actually troubleshooting any issues beforehand as we can. So feel free to switch that off. for anybody out there setting it up yourselves, and a lot of times it's a lot easier to work on these things when it's actually sitting on the table, kind of like on its back, so that way you can work over it, not necessarily next to it. It can get kind of uncomfortable that way, but
place it down.
this is where the assembly takes place. We'll be back once it's actually inside the box. So we've got the motherboard in here, and since this is actually a relatively large case, it can take up to an eATX motherboard. There's actually only 7 standoffs, but it does have positions for up to 9 if necessary, and actually a little bit beyond that if you really need it. But Ben's going through and he's making sure that everything's all set. If you want to do this assembly, it's recommended to have something along the lines of like a magnetic tip screwdriver or something that I can actually hold onto the screws. Otherwise, it could be a little bit more frustrating. But things seem to be going pretty well. And then pretty soon, we're going to have everything hooked up and ready to do our first maiden voyage. So one of the things that you guys might run into if you do it in the same orientation as we do, we're not looking at the manual and we're just trying to figure out where the switches and stuff like that are. It would have been much easier if we'd have actually plugged all the components from the case into the motherboard before actually installing the motherboard. So that way we wouldn't have had to go through this. But you live and you learn, and we should really know better. But
Hot mess of tech shows.
we'll be back with more once everything's actually in the case. We will have the RAM, we'll have the video card in there, and ready to basically boot this bad boy up. So what have we got here? We've got
Lots of finger smudges.
Yeah, well, I'm sure he'll clean that off later.
Probably not.
But it looks like what we've got our motherboard, we've got our RAM, we've got our CPU, we've got our video card. This looks about ready to test. So, let's go to it. All right, so now we've got the moment of truth. We've got our RGB RAM, we've got everything in there. Everything's hooked up in the back, so we've got our keyboard, our mouse, monitor is on, and Ben, why don't you hit the switch? All right, so we've got turn on. This is going to have to go through a boot cycle, so it's going to have to recognize all the hardware, make sure that it can output appropriately, and then the monitor's on?
Yes.
Yeah, so the monitor's on. So once they recognize the video card and everything like that, it will show up on the monitor itself.
So we hope,
Fingers crossed.
because this always happens with us. And then we're going to take the back panel off, and it'll only work when the back panel's off.
Literally like starting a car for the first time. We're just cranking.
Reboot and select proper boot device. So, we have display.
The computer.
Whoa.
Oh, wow. That is bright as hell.
Well, inside a tinted case, I guess that would work.
So it should boot into the BIOS via either delete or F2.
I'm gonna hit F2.
Yeah. Delete. But that'll work. So BIOS has been reset. Please reconfigure BIOS. So this is actually a really interesting thing because a lot of BIOS operations were originally just purely keyboard based. Now this is a UEFI. So you can actually interface with it with a mouse and a keyboard either way. So we're going to go through and we're going to take a few looks at the options that are in here. So click OK. All right, so advanced frequency settings. What we want to do is click on that. Or hit enter. So we don't want to do anything with the overclocking. What we do is we want to go to the extreme memory profile. So we want to turn that on. Profile 1. So now it auto-selected the system modifier multiplier. So if you hadn't done that, it wouldn't have recognized that memory as 3000. It would have been functioning at 2133 for the rest of its life. So you would have been losing out on the performance that you would have had. Everything's already set up for the automatic. So you hit the escape button. So we're gonna go back. And we don't need anything else unless you want to deal with a smart fan. But you can hit the right arrow. So now inside the system, this is gonna give you your BIOS version, date. The system date will update once we hook it up to the internet. So that's not gonna be a big deal. Click over to the next right arrow. So our boot options. So we are set up for the SanDisk. But it does not have the hard drive for the SSD. Because the SSD is not formatted, I don't think. And it needs to be formatted in order for it to work.
Which should be fine because once we load into Windows boot, we can
format from there.
Correct. So the boot order is set for SanDisk. We've got the one, Western Digital as a backup. Everything is okay. Peripherals. All right, that is all good.
Disable here.
Chipset. Okay, it is recognizing the other SSD in there as port 1, not port 0. And power. Perfectly fine. Cool. Go to save and exit. Enter. Save and exit setup. Yes. So what it's going to do is it's going to reboot the system, and now it's going to prioritize loading onto the SanDisk, which should bring us to the Windows install prompt.
So now that's basically just telling it to load out of the. Am I hitting F2 again? No.
Yeah, so Windows 10 setup, we're going to go 64-bit. And now we get to the boring part that pretty much everybody has done. So we will get back to you in a moment. Cool.
Where do you want to install Windows on the 223?
We want to install Windows on the 223. So that is going to allow us to format that drive. The important reason for going to custom isn't just to assign your drive. It's going to allow you to actually turn off a lot of Windows like data mining features inside Windows 10, so that way you can maintain a little bit more privacy. So that's a pretty important thing for anybody that's new to Windows 10 or loading a fresh install. But man, look at how bling this case is. I wonder, Gigabyte should have some sort of software that's going to allow you to control not just the RGB on the fans, but also on the memory itself.
Yeah.
But you got a ton of stuff in there, Ben.
I don't know if the fans are multicolored or not.
Probably not. So everybody, the final touches are going on the case. You can see that the stained tinted glass there is keeping everything a little bit more subdued on these glowing white fans, RGB memory, and he's got some aesthetic upgrades that need to happen. But we're inside Windows, everything's installed, and then we're updating. So Mac had to go home. So it's just me and Ben messing around with this computer, but everything's all said and done. So thank you for swinging by MES Tech. This is a little bit rogue. It's not necessarily our normal format, but we'll get back to that. But we wanted to share the experience of Ben building his first computer, and it scored 1204 on Cinebench, which is pretty solid. So
I've been told.
yeah, what do you think, Ben?
I'm happy with it. It looks cool. I still had no idea what we did, but it's there, so we did it.
Perfect. I can't wait to see what it's like with the 1070 in it.
Yeah, me either.
All right, later, guys. I will catch you in the next video. As always, like, share, subscribe, comment. Tell us whether we're doing good or bad. I'm assuming it's bad.